Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. On July 30th, 1875, in Norfolk, Virginia, George Edward Pickett breathed his last in a losing battle with a liver abscess of unknown origins. He was 50 years old. News spread quickly to Richmond. A few days later, on the evening of August 2nd, Pickett's former comrades, led by one of his division commanders, General James L. Kemper, now the governor of the Commonwealth, gathered at the city's opera house to pay tribute to the man revered for his love of Virginia and honored for, as one veteran put it, the supreme hour when he marched into the jaws of death on the iron-clad heights of Gettysburg. Through the evening, veterans and others celebrated Pickett, whose death came just a decade after the war ended and at a time of waning support in the North for Reconstruction, the passage of a Civil Rights Act that was poorly enforced and eventually declared unconstitutional, and the rise of violence and intimidation against Black citizens in the Southern states. At Richmond's Opera House that August night, the glorification of General Pickett, the hero who shouldered the grief and loss of fellow Virginians in the charge that took his name, took center stage. I want to read you a report from the city's Daily Dispatch newspaper that reports the highlights. It's headlined, General George E. Pickett, honor to his memory. Memorial meeting at the Opera House last night. Speeches by General Kemper, Major Stiles, Bishop Dudley, Captain Wise, and Reverend Dr. Hogue. Resolutions adopted. The report begins. The death of General George E. Pickett, which took place at Norfolk last week, was the occasion of a meeting of ex-Confederates and other citizens at the Virginia Opera House last night to do honor to his memory, to recall to the public mind his services and virtues, and to express sympathy with his bereaved family and relatives in the loss that they have sustained. Owing to the heavy storm which preceded the meeting and the threatening clouds crossing the heavens at the fixed hour for his commencement, many ladies and gentlemen who earnestly desired to be present were prevented from attending. As it was, the number there, representing all classes of our people, was sufficient to demonstrate what hold General Pickett had upon the affections and admiration of our people. The meeting was called to order by General Dabney H. Maury, on whose motion General James L. Kemper, governor of the state, was elected chairman. General Kemper's speech. General R. Lindsay Walker, P.T. Moore, and J.D. Imboden were appointed to wait upon the governor to inform him of his election. The committee, having performed that duty, introduced the governor, who, in accepting the chair, said, "Fellow citizens, you have assembled tonight to render the last sad testimonial of honor to the memory of a soldier and a patriot. It is well for us that we are called upon to pause in the midst of the excitements and the jostling strifes of the hour. It is a mournful event which now speaks to the stormy passions of men and bids them, peace, be still. It is not merely a domestic, but a public affliction wrought by the hand of the Most High, an honorable life cut down in its vigor and prime, which solemnly summons us to behold the example it has left us, to profit by the lessons it teaches us, and to honor and cherish the deeds and virtues which adorned it. It is not for me now to recite. It would be premature at this time to portray the life and services of George E. Pickett. His record as a soldier will go down to the coming generations as part of the history of his country. I cannot yet trust myself to describe the qualities and achievements which shed luster upon his career. The heart feels most when the lips move not. Through a series of fierce and bloody ordeals, he was my commander, my comrade, and my friend. It is the man rather than the soldier that we contemplate now, if I were called upon to name the one quality which shone conspicuously above all others in his private life, as well as in his public relations, I would point to that ardent and overflowing generosity of temperament, that beautiful unselfishness of heart, which preferred the cause of his country to his own and his friend to himself. In 1861, he held by a secure tenure a life appointment of honor and emolument in the Army of the United States, but without a moment of hesitation, on account of any interests or fortunes of his own, he forsook his most cherished hopes and aims. He instantly gave up all at the bidding of Virginia, and, taking his life in his hand, he threw himself at the critical moment on the side of his native state in the hour of her deadly and fearful struggle for existence. The path of duty, then, as in every great crisis, was the path of self sacrifice and suffering and sorrow, and he pursued it without faltering to the end. In the midst of the sternest trials, his heart overflowed with sympathy and affection for others. Amid the closing scenes of battle, he was seen to sob and weep with unrestrained anguish over the dead and wounded of his command. At the close of the war, when deprived of his profession, stripped of fortune, and pressed by adversity, he proudly refused to depend on the preferred aid of friends. Although for years he battled sorely against the grim fiend of want, although he writhed under the whip and stings of poverty, yet he abated no jot of heart or hope, but with a genial, cheerful, and courageous spirit, he struggled on to the last, not for wealth, not for sums of gold in sealed bags, but for the glorious privilege of being independent. Let those who strive solely to heap up riches behold the simplicity, the modesty, and poverty which marked the later life of the patriot and hero. The very sacrifices, the wants and privations which he thus courted and endured constitute nobler treasures of wealth, a far richer and more enduring inheritance for his son than the sum of the gold of California added to all the gems of Samarkand. Let the utilitarian spirit of the times stand rebuked beside the beer of Pickett. Let the ingenious youth of the land take warning that there are few purer, loftier, and richer aims and rewards of life than are found in the groveling pursuit of gold. Let them look to the end of him who has made wealth his altar and his God. See him as he goes down to the vile dust from whence he sprung, unwept, unhonored, and unsung. And then let them turn to this dead soldier, made poor by the sacrifices of a patriotic life, and behold a commonwealth bending over his tomb in mourning and tears and in love. He sleeps well, he sleeps gloriously, forever embalmed in the hearts of his countrymen. Peace be the white-winged guardian of his ashes and his memory. Soldier, rest, thy warfare o'er. Sleep the sleep that knows no breaking. Dream of battlefields no more. Days of danger, nights of waking. Sergeant E. H. Chamberlain and Lieutenant L. S. Edwards were elected secretaries of the meeting. Resolutions reported. Major Stiles moved that a committee of 9 be appointed to draft resolutions. Agreed to. The chairman appointed to constitute the committee, Major Robert Stiles, Honorable R. M. T. Hunter, General D. H. Maury, General J. D. Imboden, Captain H. D. Danforth, Captain W. K. Martin, Dr. James Beale, Mr. R. Baldwin, Lieutenant R. McC. Jones. The committee, after retiring and consulting through their chairman, Major Stiles, reported the following resolutions. Whereas an all-wise providence has removed by our death our distinguished fellow citizen and friend, Major General George E. Pickett, from a family circle of which he was at once the stay and support and the gentle, affectionate head, from comrades who admired and loved him, and from a community that honored him and was honored by him, be it therefore resolved that in the death of General Pickett, Virginia mourns the loss of a son who never failed to respond to her call with patriotic devotion and whose sword ever flashed in the van of defense of her honor and her soil. That in his career as a soldier, we recognize the hero of two wars and many battles whose name and fame are indissolubly linked with and illustrate the brightest glories of the historic Army of Northern Virginia. That in his character as a man, we admire the blending of the sturdiest manhood with the tenderest heart and reverence, that truly heroic spirit that could turn without a murmur from the absolute command of thousands of gallant men to the daily discharge of the thousand unaccustomed duties of his modest, quiet calling. Resolved that while we honor and mourn in him all the sad but glorious memories of our grand past, we also commend to our own limitation his cheerful and gallant courage, his lofty and delicate personal honor, his genial, generous, and kindly temper, his devotion to his duty and his state, and his unobtrusive worth as a citizen. Resolve that we tender to his bereaved family our profoundest sympathy in a grief which we'll well know is far too deep and overwhelming to be assuaged by any human consolation. Resolved that the secretary of this meeting be requested to furnish a copy of these resolutions to the family of the deceased. Major Robert Stiles, Major Stiles, in presenting the resolutions, spoke of Pickett's great modesty and of him as the leader of a division that deserved to rank with the terribles of Marshal Victor or the 10th Legion of Caesar. He knew the deceased as one who breathed an atmosphere of personal intrepidity. As a Christian and as a man, Major Stiles desired to record publicly his honor for Pickett's valor. Many were ignorant of that kindred trait of Pickett's at which the mistaken Christianity of these days is prone to sneer, the high and delicate sense of personal honor, and the speaker illustrated his point by an appropriate anecdote. Another proof of Pickett's greatness was his quiet unobtrusiveness in a civil career following the illustrious positions he held in the armies of the United States and the Confederacy. Major Stiles spoke with great eloquence and effect of the sacrifices of General Pickett in leaving the United States Army and desired to record the indebtedness of the Southern people to Pickett and his companions of the old army who, in resigning, gave up all worldly chances that men could have under a rich and powerful government to enter our cause. He knew of no set of men who had exhibited more manhood or more deserve our gratitude. Major Stiles' speech was one of the best of the evening. His description of Pickett's charge at Gettysburg, the rush up the hill, the crossing of the soldiers' bayonets, and the fearful struggle was a splendid passage and, delivered in his eloquent style, thrilled nearly everyone present. Bishop Dudley. Governor Kemper introduced Bishop Dudley as the first speaker after Major Stiles. The bishop said it was almost by a strange accident that he was able to be present at the meeting and to bring his offering to the memory of his childhood friend. The peculiar trait he had to notice in General Pickett's character was his extreme love for Virginia. He never forgot that he was a Virginian, whether as a boy carrying the flag of his country over the walls of Chapultepec on the border or in the subsequent and more stirring and eventful scenes of the Confederate War. His whole heart throbbed with affection for his mother state, and he was proud of his division as Virginia soldiers, remarking on one occasion to an old friend whom he jumped from his horse to greet as his division was passing through Richmond, "Molly, these are my boys, and they are all Virginians." In Pickett and Pickett's men, the glory of Virginia is best illustrated, and the speaker exhorted his hearers never to let the hour or the day come when they would fail to uphold her honor and glory and to go with her whenever she calls, because she is our mother. The bishop lamented that General Pickett had died away from Richmond and from those who had known him from boyhood, though he had been in the midst of an affectionate comrades in Norfolk. He hoped that the time would soon come when his remains would be brought to Richmond, when a monument to Lee should be erected here, and Pickett and his other lieutenants should be gathered together in the midst of the soldiers who lie buried beside our royal river. Bishop Dudley speaks with a pathos and feeling that at once commends his words to his hearers. In concluding, he pictured the Confederates as men who lacked nothing of soldiership but success, nothing of calamity but dishonor. Captain George D. Wise. Captain George D. Wise, having been introduced, said General Pickett was one who moved so noiselessly along that some of us had forgotten we had a hero among us. And he clearly and graphically sketched the military history of the deceased from the time he entered the military academy at West Point until that supreme hour when he marched into the jaws of death on the iron-clad heights of Gettysburg. The speaker very cleverly compared the charge of the 600 at Balaclava with the onslaught of these 6,000 Virginians at Gettysburg, and introduced some of Tennyson's beautiful lines about the former adapted to suit the charge of the latter. He spoke of General Pickett's sacrifices for our cause and also of the sacrifices made indeed by all the old Army officers who espoused our side and declared that theirs was the hardest fortune of any who had been overwhelmed by the war. Unused to civil pursuits, they were at a loss how to enter into the struggle for bread, but since the war they had shown the most exalted patriotism and Roman fortitude. These heroic men have as well entitled themselves to the affection of their people for their sufferings and sacrifices since the war as for their courage and skill in battle. Their conduct challenged the admiration even of our enemies, and of them Pickett furnished one of the brightest examples. In closing, Captain Wise claimed that Virginia has a right to be proud of her dead, of her Lees, her Jacksons, her Hills, her Stuarts, and her Picketts, and like the Vestal virgins we read of in mythology, whose duty it was to keep forever bright the sacred fire in the temple, it is incumbent upon us to see to it that the sacred fires of patriotism are kept forever burning and warm in the temples of the hearts of our people. Governor Kemper, in presenting Dr. Hogue as the next speaker, said he had been not altogether but almost a Confederate soldier, and if his garments were not rolled in blood, it might at least be said of him that one blast of his bugle voice was worth 1,000 men. Dr. Hogue said, "Mr. Chairman and fellow citizens, whatever else we may have lost in the defeat of our Confederate cause, the demonstration of this evening proves that patriotism still survives, and not only so, but eloquence also, to give noble expression to the sentiments which glow in the patriot's heart. Absorbed as we may and must be in the pursuit of our material interests, do not fear, Mr. Chairman, that while this generation lasts, the tidings of the death of a great Confederate soldier will fail to stir to its center the Virginia heart, or to gather her sons around the bier to pay all that the heart can pay, the tribute of admiration and love and tears. During the progress of the war, we were often made sad when the tidings came of the fall of one and another of our distinguished officers on the field, but this occasioned little surprise, for we knew how small the chances of life were to those who daily walked on the perilous edge of battle, and we felt there was something fitting in the fall of the soldier on the field of his duty and fame. But equally great is the heroism of those who survived the war and with patient dignity accepted the situation with all its humiliations and without bitterness to the victor and without resentment quietly addressed themselves to secular pursuits and uncomplainingly toiled on until the great order came for retirement from the cares and sorrows of this mortal life. My friend Major Stiles has alluded to the singular union of firmness and gentleness which were characteristic of General Pickett's nature. I was reminded while he spoke of what the sailor said to the defenseless little girl who, in a shipwreck, appealed to him to save her. His answer was, "My child, I have a hard hand to row and a soft heart to field, and I will try." So our dead comrade had a soldier's arm to strike when duty bade him draw his battle blade, and a woman's heart to forgive and to respond to every appeal which helpless sorrow made to his sympathy. And yet, modest and unostentatious as was this quiet citizen, his name is inseparably linked to the momentous event in our history. I say more, his name will shine with unfading luster on the brightest page of our Confederate annals. Gettysburg was the culmination of our great struggle, and it was there that General Pickett, at the head of his not 6,000, as my gallant friend Major Wise has said, though it does not become me to question the statement of a military man at the head of less than 5,000 men. Governor Kemper said 4,500 moved down the slopes with the precision of a regiment on parade amid a fiery storm of shot and shell, officers and men falling in appalling numbers, but the ranks steadily closing up and pressing on with the calmness of a courage too sublime for doubt or fear, until the heights were gained and all that human valor could achieve was won. The charge of the Light Brigade of Balaclava was magnificent, but it was a mistaken one as a military movement. The charges of Soult and Murat at Austerlitz were splendid when their great captain fired them by saying, "Come, let us end the war," with a clap of thunder. The charge of the Old Guard at Waterloo was resistless. But history chronicles no greater charge, Mr. Chairman, than that which Pickett led and in which you received your honorable wound. Long continued applause. Well, has it been said, on that day the name of Virginia was baptized in fire and will illuminate forever the temple of history. But why speak of these things now? I shall not ask pardons for reminding you of the greatest of present duties. Under the spell which this providence lays upon our hearts, who does not feel the infinite propriety of the prayer of the psalmist, so teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Whether the golden bowl of life is broken by the sudden shock of battle, or whether the silver cord is loosed by the slow band of disease, the inevitable hour must come. Let us strive then, not only in expectation of death, but in preparation for it, so that when the summons comes, it may find us, with life's duties all becomingly discharged, at peace with God, in perfect charity with mankind, our souls safe in the hands of their Redeemer, and thus enter upon eternal life and blessedness. A letter from Dr. Minnigerode. The following letter from Dr. Minnigerode was read: Richmond, August 2nd, 1875, to His Excellency Governor James L. Kemper. Dear Sir, in my character as pastor of General Pickett and his wife, I feel it my duty and my privilege to unite with our fellow citizens who are to meet tonight under your auspices in bearing testimony to the sorrow in which his death has plunged our community and our whole state of Virginia. In honoring the brave, we honor ourselves. A previous engagement of much importance prevents me from attending the meeting, greatly to my regret, and I can only say that I will feel honored in cooperating in anything that the meeting may resolve on and in which my services would be desirable. Very respectfully, Charles Minnigerode. General Pickett's remains. General Maury moved that a committee be appointed to make arrangements for the reception of General Pickett's remains when they arrive here from Norfolk sometime in the fall, as is expected. Agreed to. The chairman appointed General Heath General Maury, General Moore, Colonel Lloyd Beale, and General Imboden. By request of the chairman, Dr. Hogue offered prayer, and the meeting immediately afterwards adjourned. All the speakers received liberal applause whenever Pickett's gallantry and devotion in war or his struggles with poverty and humiliation since the war were mentioned. So there you have the summary of the gathering at the Opera House in Richmond, Virginia on August 2nd, 1875, soon after the death of General George Edward Pickett. For those of you who are wondering how Pickett's charge sat with his comrades after the war, in this moment in 1875, it becomes clear that at least the speakers were in awe of Pickett and revered him. And of course, as often happens when someone who has been in the public eye passes, much of the sadness and terrible times that may have been part of their life are put to the side, and the person is remembered in a very positive manner. So here we have the same with General Pickett. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.